Hello, this is Spellbinder with this story from Veterans Today, Military Veterans and Foreign Affairs Journal. This is a story put out by Gordon Duff, September 6, 2010. Gordon Duff says, America's war racketeers, the real terrorist. And this is what is really going on. It says, is America's racketeering elite a terrorist organization? Of course they are. There is a group of Americans, a combination of coward, gangster, politician, buffoonish soldier, con man, Israel-obsessed bully. These are the users and takers who live their lives, some invisible, some media darlings, some famous heroes that portrayed by their friends in the media, their fellow thugs. This is the world's greatest terrorist organization. The threat to not only world security, but the lives and freedoms of people of the world. These are the people who bleed America dry and have for generations, the people who have turned America into what the world clearly sees it as now, a weapon to be wielded against the common and decent people of the world on behalf of criminal terrorists. Everyone has heard the story at one time or another. President Wilson was duped into setting up the Federal Reserve System. The term Federal Reserve is a lie. The Rothschild family and their predecessors that have controlled European currency forever since the 1600s and before took over operation of America in 1913, printing our money and running the country through a series of banks that they control, and not all that secretly. Federal Reserve means Rothschild. Rothschild means poverty, hunger, ignorance, and most of all, war. This is all you really need to know. Everything else, the Pentagon, Wall Street, the corporate news, Congress, the Supreme Court, the arms industry bandits, are nothing but their henchmen, cowards, and thieves that sold their souls for cash and perception of power and vice. Walk the corridors of power in America and you will see vice, drugs, sex, and corruption. We all know the nice Jewish girls that are passed around Washington like party favors. Monica Lewinsky, Chandra Levy are only two names America knows. There are hundreds more. It doesn't take a genius to figure out who recruited them and why. Sex is power in Washington, London, Rome, and Tel Aviv. If they aren't snared in Washington, they fly them to Tel Aviv. They got John McCain in Hanoi, or so reliable sources tell us, giving North Vietnam virtual control over American trade policies with Vietnam and guaranteeing the slow death of hundreds of abandoned prisoners of war. It was the Franklin scandal that told us how bad it was. A case is made against two American presidents as pedophiles. Not just them, but hundreds of others, including dozens of prominent members of Congress. Franklin went on after the GOP and their weakness, phony Christianity, phony family values, and the love of young boys. We know it isn't just the GOP and Pentagon, but Franklin taught us how far America could go to cover up well-documented crimes, how much control there is over not only the criminal justice system, but the news media as well. The political assassination of Chandra Levy was another, even easier than the murder of Pat Tillman, now supposedly revealed to the world as the cover-up of an accident. One of the most obvious expressions of disdain for American displayed by the criminal elite is the treatment of American soldiers and veterans. This week it was discovered that the Prudential Insurance, one of America's best-known companies, was defrauding the families of soldiers killed in action. Insurance payments to the survivors of those killed in wars now admitted by all to be not just mistakes, but clearly criminal wars of aggression, were withheld and reinvested, but the proceeds were retained by Prudential and never paid to the survivors. Prudential, one of the most influential corporations on the planet, profits not only from war but from American deaths in war, with America's Supreme Court rule on a 5-4 basis by justices who cannot be described in terms other than corporate Zionist lackeys. The recent decision allowing unlimited campaign donations by international corporate conglomerates gives Prudential and their friends and affiliates virtual control over America's military adventurism. That power had always been there, but now it is written into law. Corporations control America's government, and sending armies to do their bidding is now their legal right. There are no checks and balances left. Calling them armies is only a misdemeanor, as much as calling Congress a legislative body or the Supreme Court as an organization meant to support justice is equally silly. Let's look at what we call an army, or in a broader sense, our new agile military. America turned into the road to total bankruptcy and collapse during the Reagan years. Star Wars is the biggest of the cons. The ideal was to develop hard science that could create a missile shield for America. Tests were falsified, money squandered, corruption was out of control. Nothing whatsoever resulted in the total failure of the Patriot missile system during the first Gulf War. Demonstrated every defensive technology can be defeated by an offensive technology for the tenth the price. The French taught the world this with the Maginot Line. Billions, actually hundreds of billions, have been spent to develop stealth everything, especially aircraft. However, by turning down their radar frequencies, the Serbs had no trouble shooting down our stealth planes. The technology is a joke, and the sciences to beat stealth was in place long before the planes hit the drawing board. Stealth is a con. Once upon a time, we had one Marine Corps. It worked out well for the United States, as General Smedley Butler loved pointing out. It was always there when Wall Street needed thugs to collect the debt. Now we have the dozen cardboard cutout versions of the Marine Corps, and every one of them is a con. The game, of course, is to sell the ideal of elitism as a way of funding not only wasteful spending and redundancy, but to secretly give our rogue government their own terrorists, gangster enforcers, drug-running lackeys, and death squads like any banana republic. When this wasn't bad enough, we had to privatize. Not only does America have tens of thousands of troops probably involved in the war crimes such as kidnapping, murder, torture, and drug running, but we now have private contracting companies hiring foreign nationals to do the things even worse. What do we mean by that? Simply put, thousands of Islamic contractors are now employed by the CIA and the Department of Defense to perform black ops that even the most secretive organizations can't be trusted with. What we are doing, of course, is guaranteeing illness in order to justify wasting billions on cure. Our Middle Eastern and South Asian-born contractors are offered to perform tasks with deniability as actually stated in public brochures. What this means to anyone who knows the English language is that we are hiring terrorists, employees of American countries who some believe are supposed to attack fellow Muslims. We are trying to sell the ideal we are using terrorists against terrorists. There are now strong signs that one of the most successful operations these groups have thus far planned and executed was the Mumbai attack. Are the Fort Hood shootings and the Times Square fizzler two more? 70% of the military spending in the world serves on one purpose: to fight Muslim terrorists, whose only issue is American support of Israeli action against Palestinians, or so we are told. However, as most of us know, that most Muslims could care less about Palestine and do business with Israel all day long. It should also be obvious that the war on terror is a con also. Historians have taken a new look at World War I and found it to be an attempt to destabilize Europe and bring about a socialized communist takeover. It is only coincidental that the communists were almost all Jews. The war would have ended in 1916 when Germany agreed to withdraw from France, were it not for negotiations between Britain and the Rothschilds that accumulated on the Balfour Declaration. Britain got the billions they needed from the Rothschilds, who brought America into the war. Communists took over Russia, and for a time Germany, Hungary, and other countries also. There was even an attempt to take over the United States in 1918, called the Red Scare. It is only coincidental that almost all involved were Jews. Amazing. These historians trying to take an honest look at our falsified history of World War II are called anti-Semites and Holocaust deniers. All lose their teaching positions. Many are jailed, and more are accidented or suicided themselves or family members. The pattern is there, but will suppress as long as the international power structure remains as it is. Hitler warned that Germany would be destroyed and that Russia would take over Eastern Europe and try to conquer the world. This warning wasn't in 1945, but 1922. He warned that in the end, Russia would be undermined, as would America and Britain, and the war was against Christianity and was never politics. Those who study such things will gladly tell you that Russia was never communist, nor more than Sweden or Israel. America escaped the yoke of communism and instead became a hybrid state, not really socialist, but a corporate dictatorship ruled from Tel Aviv and London. America existed only as a slave labor pool in factories that manufacture no products other than debt. Imagine being able to wield the world's largest military force, really mercenaries for a worldwide gangster cartel, and never have to pay them a cent. They don't even have to win wars. Losing is even more profitable. Thus, in return, the issue of the great con game now being sold as fighting terrorism and extremism, but if anything, not only creating terrorism, but creating future generations of extremists, but guaranteeing that the failure of any state that fails to comply with the dictatorship model America and her friends spread across the world during the Cold War. Any nation failing to become the right kind of police state, and we can name 40 of these easily, is quickly branded a terrorist or evildoer, be they an Islamic, democratic, or socialist republic. It isn't politics, it's about slavery. Today's con is war, selling it like a product, equivalent to decades of rotting meat, spoiled eggs, or those poisoned products the Chinese are so glad to sell us, and we are so happy to put in the food chain until we are caught. War isn't all technology and wizardry. Our sons and daughters wiping out villages around the world while sitting at the computer screens, clenching game controllers and yelling out "Capri" when the smoke clears and the ground is strewn with blood, body parts, and broken children toys. Our favor of the month, the real war, is Afghanistan, simply a replay of the American Revolution, with U.S. playing both the British soldiers and the Hussein mercenaries, and uncontrollable-looking Barack Obama taking the helm as the madman King George. Mullah Omar is doing John Adams, and the Taliban are the Minutemen. The Troy sympathizers and the Benedict Arnold types are the Khazari regime and their backers, whoever that might be. Nobody is playing the French. They aren't needed, as America is quite capable of beating herself out of incompetence and corruption alone. No enemy required. But we do have an enemy in the war. With all the talks of our technology are just like the redcoats marching down the pike. Vehicles blown apart by IEDs and RPGs, and the riflemen behind every rock ready to spew lethal fire from their long-range rifles. Our troops carrying pea shooters, 5.56mm assault rifles, short range and unreliable, are supposed to win the hearts and minds of people who hate the traitors and criminals who we put in power, and hate even more knowing that the heartless destruction we rain on their families, not just our UAVs, pilotless murder machines, but our death squads that have killed thousands of innocent civilian terrorist suspects, and our confusion, religious, racial hatred of plain and simple insanity. The fanatic American army is little more than a press game. Conspirators of 18th century slaves, the stop loss, and other tricks they try to endless deployments until they are too sick and too crazy to go on. The privileged elites never cared about, never will. Senator Alan Simpson recently took the regimes of the Senate Finance Committee, making it clear that to all deemed stupid enough to serve that such foolishness would be rewarded with what should have been expected all along: betrayal. If only it was possible for American rulers to manage to profit from the suffering of the veterans like they do from the destruction of our military forces, those who manage to survive the war might have a fighting chance of surviving the love and thanks of a grateful nation. I've been thanked before, and I wouldn't wish it on a dog. The end. And there you got it. That's the truth, coming from a veteran himself. I hope that was enjoyable. I hope you learned something from that. I understand that, yes, we're the bad guys in this time. The banksters made sure of that. And as he said, we're playing the redcoats to a country that supposedly are now the Minutemen. We're over there killing their relatives, and you expect we're not going to get blowback. Oh well, till next time, this is Spellbinder. Be good at it. Good day.